Hello, I am Mont or Alex, and today we're going to be talking about Lords of the Fallen. If you don't know what that is, I've included a few links in the video description, but here's how I describe it to a friend if they asked. It's a Dark Souls clone made by Western developers. You can pick it up on PS4, Xbone, and PC. I have the PS4 version, so all of my thoughts and opinions are based on that. I'm a little hesitant to call this a proper review, but that's probably the best term. I'm going to talk about what I liked and disliked about Lords of the Fallen. And I'm also going to use this video to gauge interest in a potential Let's Play of the game. That is to say, if you'd like to see me upload a full playthrough of it, let me know in the comments. So we'll start with the things I liked about Lords of the Fallen, and then move on to the things that I did not like. Of course, these are all just my opinions, so of course there's going to be a little bias. Anyway, the things I liked about Lords of the Fallen. The graphics. That is to say, the visual effects. The easiest thing to praise here would be the game's lighting. It's probably the best part about the presentation as a whole. It can be colourful at times, and for the most part it feels consistent, apart from the rare occurrences where it would glitch out and completely change instantly. But as far as the visuals go, the lighting is certainly what I would list as the game's strongest point. The graphics as a whole are quite pleasant to look at. The game is technically adept to my amateur's eye, which knows nothing about coding. And for the most part the frame rate was relatively solid. On PlayStation 4 it's a target 30 FPS, and as far as I can tell it rarely dipped below 25, but who can say for sure. The level design. This will crop up again because I both liked and disliked the level design of the game. At times it was good, and at other times it was not. At its best though, Lords of the Fallen's level design harkened back to some of the great moments of Souls games, but it never exceeded Souls. It has its moments though, with small interconnected halls that mesh well, and you never know what is lurking around the next corner. Small miscellaneous things. There are little touches in the game that I enjoyed, which I feel I should point out here. For example, the ability to pick up items for a quest before you actually have that quest, so that you can at once complete that quest when you do get it. That's nice. The ability to equip an entire armor set at once instead of having to manually select each piece. The selection of weapons being fairly large, so that you're always having something new to try out, even if the actual archetype of movesets are quite limited. They don't feel stiflingly so. The attempts at trying new things. Perfectly timing strikes to consume less stamina is a nice idea, but not really implemented all that well. The concept behind it is solid though. Likewise, the idea of banking EXP or saving it and using your ghost to heal yourself, nice concepts, but they didn't actually have that much of an effect on the gameplay. The Tyrant Heart was a nice touch too, the enemies who can only be killed once you pick up their hearts. And beyond all of those things, there are also many elements from the Souls games that, if you liked them in Dark Souls or Demon Souls, you might like them here. For example, if you like being able to build your character the way you like, the basic combat principles and so forth. If you liked them in Dark Souls, you'll probably like them here. There's a lot to touch on, but considering how much of a Dark Souls clone this is, I'm not going to touch on them all. It's like Path of Exile or Diablo, or Dark Alliance and Diablo. Only in this case, the imitation most certainly does not ever improve upon the original. It instead copies it, without understanding what made it great, in my opinion. And on that note, let's move on to the parts of Lords of the Fallen that I did not like. I must stress that I didn't hate the game, there were just a lot of small and large problems that prevented me from enjoying it as much as I should have, and here are some of them. The gameplay. By far the biggest problem I had with Lords of the Fallen was the gameplay. And where to begin? Perhaps with something that I find myself noticing the most. Early on in the game, it tells you that enemies follow the same rules as you do, or something to that effect. That stuck with me because it is not true. Perhaps the two examples I have that exemplify my point here the most are these. I tried kicking an enemy down a hole early on in the game. Instead, the enemy floated across the gap, floated in the air for a moment, coolly regarding my character, and then gradually moved over to another platform. Moments later, I fell to my doom. And then there's when enemies will continuously attack you, which I suppose could be possible if they had something like 99 endurance, stamina or energy or whatever it's called, despite being a low level enemy. And then there's the fact that some enemies seem to be designed for a completely different game with a completely different set of rules and mechanics. More than once, perhaps closer to 100 times, I would wait for an enemy to attack, and then I would strike, and, assuming I hit them, they would revenge hit me before I could actually block, or roll away, or move away, or do anything. What is the point of that? Why are player recovery times huge whereas enemies have practically none? Best example of that might be the champion boss. He has a standard, I will run at you, and if you dodge, I will hit the wall mechanic. Only, when he hits the wall, he bounces off and turns around with practically zero chance to hit him unless you want to be hit yourself by his next attack. And the best way I eventually found to beat him was to kite him around until my magic was up, spawn a clone, then wail on him for a second or two whilst he hit the clone. The game is so clunky that it frustrates. The character is slow. Even naked and using daggers and nothing else, the character is slow. Using the heaviest class of weapons is not nearly as satisfying as it should be. Some are so heavy, you cannot use them with one hand no matter how much strength you have. And their wind-up time is so long that it renders them practically useless for much of the game. And when you do hit the enemy with the ultra great axe or great hammer stuff, it barely does any more damage than a dagger would. The difference is minuscule, and makes it feel like you might as well just use a longsword for the whole game. What is the point of that, I wondered? The only time I felt like I was doing the right amount of damage was in the last 2, maybe 3 hours of the game or so, around the time I picked up an amulet that heavily increased my damage output, but also made me take damage for every hit that I land. Basically like the Chaos Blade. And you know what, that leads perfectly onto my next point. The health regeneration in this game is stupid. In Dark Souls, it is relatively easy to not get hit if you are playing well. If you know the enemies and their attack patterns, you can dance around them and never get hit. In Lords of the Fallen? Not really. The rolls, even the fastest ones, are not all that good. Enemies have such small recovery windows compared to you that they will be able to hit you more than you would like, no matter how careful you are. Health recovery is basically a clone of Estus, and it works the same as Estus flasks. You have a small amount of potions that you can replenish at checkpoints, only they don't replenish all your potions. You can increase your total number of potions by picking up more empty bottles throughout the world, and very late into the game you can upgrade your potions too. I'm not really sure what that did, but well, who knows. And I'm not even really sure how the empty bottles work, because at one point I reached 7 potions, and then later went back down to 6. And then later I picked up another bottle and went back up to 7. I think it just bugged out on me, or the bottle decided Harkin was too fat and wanted an escape from his chunky, monkey hands. The warrior class has a spell that increases health regeneration for a few seconds whilst it's down and you're standing near it, but the base level of it is so bad that it barely even moves your health by a few pixels. But this just means that you need to play carefully. Right? Wrong! The warrior is the type that you intend to play with heavy weapons. Heavy weapons have such huge startup times that you're likely to get hit whilst using them, so obviously that means you then need to stack up on heavy armor and poise, unless you want to be slapped all over the place. So in other words, the playstyle that needs to get hit the most has the least ways to recover health, which makes no sense. At some point I got a weapon from a boss that had a heavy attack that would replenish a little amount of health, and I never unequipped that from the favourites from the rest of the game. But is that how they want people to play the game? Stopping after almost every encounter, and then slowly regenerating health while standing in a pool of blood that spawned from their halberd? I hope not. It kills game momentum and pacing, and it's boring. How often in Dark Souls do you find yourself sitting there, equipping Sanctus, and waiting for it to heal you to fall? Probably not that many times, I'm betting. It's just one of many tiny mistakes this game has suffered. And there are dozens more I could list, but I won't go through them all. Instead, I'll focus on ones that irritated me the most. The lack of a map or warp system. The entire game takes place in 2 areas, a human area and a demon area, to put it simply. There is loads of backtracking and instances where the game will go and meet this character in this building. Only problem is, well, ignoring the problem of who the hell is that character, they all look the same. Apart from that, all the buildings look the same more or less. There's no map whatsoever as far as I could see. Why? Because Dark Souls didn't have a map. From what I can gather, that's the only reason this game doesn't have a map. Because Dark Souls doesn't have a map. This game would benefit so much from a map. It doesn't need a mini-map, it doesn't need huge objective markers, it just needs a map screen with labels so you can figure out which damn building is which. What is the citadel? What is the monastery? Why do all these buildings look the same? A lot of my game time, too much of it, of my, I don't know, what was it, 11, 15 hours it took me to beat the game? So much of it was spent trying to figure out where I had to go. I actually ended up going into a nearly end game area much earlier than I had to, because the game was just so vague and didn't point, well, it didn't point you in the direction. It doesn't like have any way of distinguishing what area is what, other than the human place and the demon place. And no, it wasn't vague even in a Dark Souls way. It just up and didn't really tell you anything, and everything looks so similar that you're gonna spend a lot of your time lost. Speaking of which, remember how in Dark Souls you can press back or select to highlight different stats and figure out what they do? You can't do that here. So if you've got a weapon with 100% power and are wondering what the hell power is, and whether or not you can go above 100% power by equipping a power themed rune, good luck to you. There is no way in game, as far as I could tell, to figure out what it does, and my game didn't come with a manual either, so, well, couldn't look in there. Dark Souls doesn't cram info into your face, but it is there if you need to find it. You open up the inventory stat screen in Dark Souls, press back, and you can highlight a stat, and it will tell you what it does. You can highlight poise or whatever. For the most part, Dark Souls doesn't need a map, because you don't really have specific objectives, and just exploring, going in one way, will lead you where you need to go. And even then, if someone mentions an area, they are distinct enough that you'll probably be able to find it. Imagine if Dark Souls was the undead Berg and the painted world and nothing else. That's essentially what Lords of the Fallen felt like to me. Although I had no real issues with the size or length of the game, I did certainly feel there wasn't enough variety in the level design and stages. The bosses. Obviously, in a Dark Souls clone you'd expect the bosses to be the highlight. As a matter of fact, the game is named after the bosses, Lords of the Fallen. The entire game is about defeating those lords, which makes it a shame that so few of them are inspired, challenging, or even fun to fight. At the end of the game, they even give you a dramatic reminder of all your challenges thus far, telling you how long you took to beat each boss, and how many attempts you needed, etc. All but 2 bosses I beat on the first attempt, and those 2 took me 3 attempts each. One I died to because it has an instant AoE kill, the escape to which is not really obvious or logical in any way. The other I died to because I was fighting it much earlier than I was supposed to be fighting it, and it was stupidly designed to craft champion. The last lord, the Annihilator, which is actually in this video, I beat in a minute or so. And what are the bosses? Well, let me break it down for you. There's a man with a sword and a shield, another man with a sword and a shield, a man with 2 swords but no shield, a man with a mace, a spider thing, a big thing, and a double boss that consists of fire and lizard themed enemies. There's also the final boss, which is so pathetic I actually was astonished it was the final boss. I killed it in about a minute or so, and I think I got hit once maybe? And no, I'm not saying bosses need to be hard to be good, I'm saying they need to be interesting. None of the humanoid bosses are remotely interesting or fun to fight. The big beast was essentially a poison version of Tower Knight from Demon Souls, but not nearly as cool. Mixed with the Adjudicator, and the double lizards were the only ones I perked up for remotely. How disappointing, considering the name of the game, the theme of the game, and all the hype that leads up to these lords. In the end, none of them are memorable. Good luck remembering a year from now the differences between the First Warden, the Champion, the Guardian, and the Annihilator. Those are great names, by the way, aren't they? The Champion, the Guardian, the Annihilator. They're so unique. If you can distinguish between them in a year from now, I would be frankly astonished. There is nothing here that will excite on the levels of Ornstein and Smo. There are no memorable encounters. What did they do when coming up with these bosses? Did they look at other games with great examples and promptly ignore them? Did they not care? I'm not sure, but it's very disappointing. I'm only glad I had no real expectations for this game, and I only picked it up out of curiosity for how a Souls clone might work. The visuals. Now this is largely a matter of preference and opinion. I do not like the chunky art style that Lords of the Fallen employs, one similar to Darksiders and Warcraft, you could say. That's not to say it sucks. There are really nice designs in the game, nice cloaks and nice armours with a lot of detail, but the art style as a whole is not for me. I don't like all these huge bulky guys, mages and rogues and clerics and priests who look like they've just got done punching gorillas and eating bricks. However, there are some problems with the game's visual design. Everything is so over-designed and busy that there's no contrast. Everything is just a mess of shapes and spikes and lines. There's no contrast. As my friend put it while she was watching me play, when everything is edgy, nothing is edgy. There is nothing to contrast between the human world and the horrible invading demon world. The demon world just looks like another part of the human world, only with slightly more spikes. It's actually something you can do with a lot of games. Compare the first level of a game, and then compare the last level of the game. Or, failing that, because I know some games the final level is the first level revisited, blah blah blah. Something else you can do. Compare the two most different parts of a game. Example, compare Undeadburg with Ash Lake. They look so very distinct. Compare the Citadel with the Palm of God. It looks like they could easily be 5 meters away from each other in the same area. And it's a little sad when there aren't really any moments in the game when you're playing and you want to stop and look around and take in the sights. Especially in a game like this, which is so much, based on exploration. The bugs. I experienced an alarming number of bugs during Lords of the Fallen, which is weird. I'm not the sort of person who knows how to bug out games. I don't even try to do it most of the time. I was playing Lords of the Fallen normally, and yet I ran into so many glitches and bugs. Considering this was also after a 4GB patch too, rather startling. Of course, keep in mind the date this review is up. The game's been out for like a few weeks, and I know there are more patches coming, and I'm hopeful that a lot of these bugs are gonna get patched out completely. But here's a list of the bugs and glitches as far as I can recall. Audio cutting out on sound effects and voices, needing a complete reboot of the system. Dying from jumping, as in I jumped and I landed on the platform, but I died randomly. Glitching through a wall. Now I think this was a hidden wall that was supposed to break open, but I just kind of glitched through it, and I could glitch through it, continuously. I could quit and go back in, and I could do it again and again consistently. Corpse physics. I can forgive these as they were fucking hilarious. Some cutscenes didn't play, or didn't play properly, and kind of glitched out. I lost one of my potions, empty bottles or whatever, and subtitles remaining on the screen for far too long. All of that, and I've not touched on the plot or characters or lore of Lords of the Fallen. That's because I didn't really read any of the lore flavor text on items for the most part, but the actual story was boring and had predictable plot twists. None of the dialogue was what I could call well written, and Harkin wasn't really the sort of main character I enjoy playing as. Everyone hates him even when he's doing stuff for them, and it's annoying. And it's spoiler territory, so I won't go in depth, but the fact that the humans had so much trouble fighting the demons is stupid, and when you get to the end of the game you'll figure out why. I don't really want to go in depth with character analysis, but I must say I did not find anyone in Lords of the Fallen interesting. Sure, it's an action game, so I won't hold that against it, but it's possible to have an action game with well-written characters who are more than grunting muscleheads whose motivations either make no sense or don't exist. Well, I think that about covers it. I'm not much in the habit of giving games scores or ratings, but I think Lords of the Fallen would probably be something like a, 6.5 out of 10 or something. That means it's a little above average in my eyes. Do I want to see more of the game? Well, not really. The world and characters didn't excite or intrigue me, but I'd like to see the same developers make a sequel and make it a much better game. For a first attempt, this was good. I want to see them expanding from here, to stop copying Dark Souls and to make something that is truly their own, fix the gameplay, add some more variety to the world, and perhaps tell us a tale not quite so cliché. But what did you think of Lords of the Fallen? If you've played it, that is, and would you like to see me do a full playthrough of it? I've beaten the game once, but I can certainly do a New Game Plus playthrough if there's a lot of demand for it. I'll admit, I'm not thrilled to be playing through the game again, but if there is a lot of demand for it, I can do it. That said, thank you so much for watching. I have been Mont or Alex, and I will see you guys real soon. Oh, and if you're wondering if I would recommend Lords of the Fallen, no. If you're really wanting to play something between now and Bloodborne, sure, maybe pick it up, or maybe pick it up when it's at a discount price, but I don't think this game is worth the price, and I don't think it's a very good game in general. Anyway, hope this review was at least somewhat useful. See you guys later.